we're very good at making excuses. Even when we look at that cycle of anger, we talk about the trigger. It's not really a trigger. It's an excuse I use to get angry, right? I've had families, and lots of families, focus on the trigger. So we've got an angry parent coming home from work. One kid runs and puts the laundry away because that was a trigger a few days ago. The other one is sitting at the table doing their homework because missed homework was a trigger last week. The other one runs and makes sure the counters are all clean and tidy because that was a trigger a few days ago. Angry parent comes in and there's a shoe in the front entrance and boom, the explosion happens. It's not the trigger that creates the anger. It's this buildup of emotion. If I've got a lot of emotion, I will find a trigger. I will find an excuse that I can use to explode.
This is Uncommonly Remarkable. We have surprisingly casual discussions about the lives and notable accomplishments of community leaders, entrepreneurs, and everyday folks like you and me. Think of this podcast as an opportunity to learn something new and to pick up on an entrepreneurial tip or two through open conversation. I'm Artis Beatty. I'm a doctor of optometry and the chief medical officer for My Eye Doctor OD. Though we will inevitably touch on topics within my area of expertise, the opinions and conversations held here are separate from my work with My Eye Doctor. Welcome to the show. Sabrina, welcome to the show. I'm so very excited to have you join us today.
Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here.
And I have been looking forward to the conversation because over the course of the last several weeks or so, I've had a lot of interesting conversations around the way people see themselves, how they picture themselves relative to other people, how they picture themselves towards their ideal. And this core belief system is something that I find extremely interesting. And it's going to be really nice to sit and talk with someone who really knows about this and understand it a little bit more. Maybe listeners get a better idea of how their core beliefs really affect not just the way they see themselves, but how they behave because of the way they see themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, it affects everything we do for sure.
Well, to get started, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Because you've had a varied background, and what you do today is not where you started. And so maybe talk to us a little bit about what it is you're doing right now and how you're helping people.
Sure. So I was a teacher for over 20 years, mainly working as a learning assistant teacher. So working with kids with anxiety, social anxiety, attention deficit, learning disabilities, behavioral problems, organizational issues, those kind of things. But I also taught in the regular classroom, basically taught everything from kindergarten prep right up to, grade 11 sciences. So it was a great experience to learn a variety of different things. Towards the end of my teaching career, I decided to go and become a school counselor. So I started on my master's in counseling psychology, and I went to a workshop that was presented by a man named Tony Martins, and it was looking at suicide, but it was looking at suicide from the perspective of that core belief, feeling not good enough, not important, not valued. And he looked at how suicide was really a symptom of that core belief. And so if we really want to address things more long-term for people who are struggling, we need to look deeper. At the end of the 3-day workshop, I just thought, this is what I got to do. So Tony put all of his contact information on the screen on the last day of the workshop and said if anyone wanted to talk to him further to let him know. So I did. And we went back and forth, and he finally agreed to teach me his model of therapy. And so I quit teaching in 2010 and started my own private practice. Really, the focus is that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued. Within 6 months of my practice being up and running, I had a waiting list. I've had a waiting list of up to 2 years. I hate having to turn people away and say, sorry, there's nothing I can do. So I decided to write a book called Not Good Enough, Understanding Your Core Belief and Anxiety, to provide a resource for people who can't access counseling for whatever reason, waiting lists, financial issues, maybe just not ready to actually step into a counseling session, but wants to kind of learn some more. So that's how the book kind of came to fruition as well.
Wow. And it's really interesting to hear you talk about your path because working with young children, you're working with them during some of the time that this formation of what they think about themselves or how they see themselves is happening in those formative years. And so, as you've kind of grown in your study and now looking back, do you see or remember instances where, man, I wish I would have known this then when I was working with children?
Oh, probably on a daily basis. Honestly, with the students, with staff, as a learning assistant teacher, I was often a resource as well for staff to come and talk to me about issues they were having with students and not sure how to help them learn. This information would have been very powerful for them as well. And honestly, for myself personally as well, to be able to understand my own core belief and how significantly it was impacting my life, my family, my career path. It's been life changing.
And what kinds of things really form this core belief? Is it success versus failure? Is it interactions with others? How does this form in the beginning?
The core belief is really a reflection of how all events are handled. We generally don't talk about them. We just push them away, pretend they're not there, ignore them. That feeds that core belief: not good enough, not important, not valued. So when something happens, my dog passes away, or, my best friend moves away, just, things like that happen to all of us. We're just taught, well, don't worry, that, you'll get another pet, or, you'll have more friends at school. It's just brushed aside. That reinforces that not good enough, not important, not valued core belief. So it's not so much the events as it is how the events are handled that creates that core belief.
Oh, I see. And so, and over a lifetime, these events are handled in a certain way. They influence the way you believe, and it's only if an event is handled differently that determines whether or not that core is going to stay.
Yeah, well, the core belief is going to stay. It just depends on how it's handled will decide which core belief. So we can have that core
Okay.
belief good enough, important, and valued. But we can also have that core belief not good enough, not important, not valued. Nobody's core belief is 100% one or the other. We're a bit of a combination of both. But we often see people that struggle with anxiety, with depression, just don't really feel content in life. They feel like no matter what, everybody always wants more. They're always the ones that are sacrificing for everyone else. Often that core belief, not good enough, is more significant for sure.
And you mentioned anxiety and depression and also addiction, right? As a piece of soothing or escaping the core belief can be a result as well, right?
Right. So what we often do is we go to coping strategies, unhealthy coping strategies that distract so we don't have to deal with that core belief, but ultimately they end up reinforcing and supporting that core belief. So for example, gambling. So I go out, I, have a fun evening, don't have to think about anything, get to watch all the bells and whistles and feel the adrenaline rush and all that kind of stuff. I don't have to think about anything. But now the next day, spent money I didn't really have. I'm carrying shame and guilt. I maybe broke promises to myself or to others, ultimately reinforcing and supporting that core belief again, not good enough, not important, not valued. So we want balance. And so if my core belief is not good enough, I'm going to be drawn to people, places, experiences, my behaviors, my perceptions are all going to reinforce and support that core belief. So if something good happens, I've got to kind of sabotage it or minimize it because something good happening doesn't support that core belief. They're out of balance. So I have to do something to that to create more of that balance.
Oh, wow. So when people are deciding then to come seek help and they're seeking you out, like what generally is the driving force for people to start to understand that maybe something is awry? It's not exactly the way it should be.
A lot of people are struggling with an unhealthy coping strategy of some sort. So, we definitely get people who come to counseling because their relationship is struggling. They've got anxiety. They have conflict within their family or with their children. But we also see people who come in because they're drinking too much. They're smoking too much weed. They're doing too many other heavy drugs. They're gambling. They are shopping and spending way too much money. It's often these kind of symptoms. And so in our first session, that's really what we talk about is these aren't really the problem. These are the symptoms. There's something that's feeding that. And I'll often give an example of alcohol. The success rate for AA in Canada is about 3 to 5%. So the vast majority of people who go to AA don't stop drinking. Well, if it was just about alcohol, we'd have a much higher success rate.
Right.
It's that core belief. I can go out, get drunk, don't have to feel anything, numb everything for a while. But then the next day, I feel like garbage. I'm hungover. I said things I didn't mean. I got into a fight with my partner, whatever it might be, ultimately reinforcing and supporting that core belief. So even the 3 to 5% of AA who quit drinking, a huge majority of them go to anger or gambling. So it just switches from one unhealthy coping strategy to the other, because ultimately it needs to go back and feed that core belief. So if we're just trying to stop a behavior, but we don't understand what's feeding it, the driving force behind it, we're not going to have a lot of long-term success.
So if someone is coming to counseling, what is the first thing that you do? Because a lot of people have tried counseling, or they've tried other coping mechanisms, or they've tried things to maybe undo what it is that is the symptom. How is it different when they come to counseling with you? What's the process like?
We really don't focus on the symptom. We acknowledge it, realize it's there, look at some strategies you can maybe put in place. But bottom line, they're not going to use the strategies. Not yet. They need to understand what's going on. So we're looking much deeper at what is your core belief? How has that core belief developed over years? What's your anxiety like? Anxiety is a symptom of that core belief. And a lot of people think anxiety is about, the event. I have anxiety of being out in public. Well, if it was really about being out in public, then every single person on the face of the earth would have that anxiety. Not everyone does. Anxiety is lack of confidence, not believing in yourself you can handle something. So if I don't believe I can handle being in public, I'm going to have anxiety. If I believe I can handle being in public, I'm not going to have anxiety. So anxiety is a direct reflection of that core belief, not good enough. If I feel not good enough, I'm going to have more insecurity, more self-doubt, more anxiety. So we look at it from those kind of perspectives where we're looking at maybe what are some of those symptoms? Why are they there? Helping increase that awareness of how significant that core belief really is.
Yeah, and I think that's a really big deal, is understanding what is a symptom versus what the problem is, and then being able to separate the two. And so, if I were coming to you and I'm drinking too much, and I know that drinking is a problem a problem for me, not realizing it's a symptom, maybe, and you were to tell me to stop drinking, well, that's not really addressing what the underlying problem is. And so I would have a hard time then being able to accept going through the counseling with you, right? It's like if you're not actually addressing what the underlying issue is.
Right. The vast majority of my clients, I say to them, they'll say, I'm smoking weed, or I'm drinking, or I'm gambling. And I say to them, if I told you to stop, would you? And they all say, no. It's like, great. So I'm not going to tell you to stop. Let's figure out why you're doing it in the first place. Let's empower you so you have a better understanding. Then you can figure out what you need to do to challenge and change that behavior. But it has to come from within you. And that core belief is at the root of what's in you, for sure.
So can you give an example of maybe maybe thinking a little bit about a core belief and how it would form based on an event and the way that event was handled, so that we can kind of maybe create an example to think about as we go through the other steps.
So remember, core belief isn't necessarily from an event. It's how an event is handled. So even little things like my mom says, go and clean your room. So I go and I spend 45 minutes and I clean my room and I got my dresser all cleaned up and my bed is made and my laundry's in my laundry basket. I'm feeling really proud of myself because I've done a really good job cleaning in my room. And my mom comes in my room and says, well, there's still a sock under your bed. I can see it. Rather than looking for the positive, there's that negative kind of piece there. That is just going to be very defeating. And so instead of feeling pride and confident, I'm going to feel I'm not good enough. And so it's all those little kind of comments, right? Rewashing the dishes because the dishes weren't washed properly. Being just impatient. Hurry up and get your shoes. Come on, we're going to be late for school, right? Oh, I'm not good enough. So it's all these little tiny reactions and behaviors that we often see from our parents, which is where that core belief starts for us. But to be totally honest, I mean, where did your parents get their core belief? From their parents, and so on and so on and so on. So it gets passed down generationally. And most of us, because it's been growing since, honestly, before we're even born, because our parents passed down their core belief to us, it's just this part of us that we don't even really think about. It's kind of like breathing or walking. We're not even aware how significant it is. Just happens on a daily basis.
And then you start, once that belief is started, then you apply it without really thinking about it to multiple situations, and it just becomes part of how you look at life or how you apply towards your life, right?
Absolutely, right? If I have, parents, one parent who say is got anger and lack of patience, and the other one is, nitpicks everything I do, those patterns of behavior become my thinking process. So now I'm, in my 20s, I'm living on my own. I've got my own place all by myself, but my brain has now been programmed to look for the negative, to be impatient, to have more kind of anger or aggression, keep people at a bit of a distance. So now my brain is doing it to itself. I'm doing it to myself now at this point, for sure, which you are earlier, but you still have those other influences. But over time, your brain just takes over and does it for you.
And so in the process of people coming and working with you, initially then it has to be a lot of work trying to understand what the core beliefs are and how that belief system was founded, right? Like, is it a bunch of going back and thinking about childhood? Is it like, how do you approach that piece?
Yeah. So the model that I practice is a long-term model of therapy. So most of my clients are with me a year and a half, even longer. And one of the big pieces of it is going back and learning about all of their life experiences. We'll take several sessions, 4, 6, 8, 10 sessions where we're just going back and talking about all of their life experiences. As we do that, I'm thinking, how is this developing and reinforcing and supporting that core belief? And then we talk a little bit about, okay, so can you see how that experience was handled, how that impacts your belief in yourself today? So they start connecting dots and realizing the impact and how this core belief has developed over time, for sure. Then we go back and look at, specific experiences or more about people, right? So maybe it was mom, dad, but also could have been a coach, could be if you were abused in any way, your abuser. So we go back and look at those experiences and really help them understand how, that was in the past, it's over with and done with, but you still carry the emotions, the thoughts with you on those experiences now, and they influence your daily living, for sure.
Yeah, and I think that's another big topic, right? The emotion piece, because there are emotions are very powerful and they're mixed in most situations. You're not just feeling one thing, you're feeling multiple things. But it is fairly taboo in a lot of families to really discuss the emotional piece. And so that doesn't get handled very well. how do you start to address that with people who maybe have never even thought about the emotional piece because they weren't really allowed to?
And I think that's an issue for the vast majority of people. I'm 57. We didn't talk about emotions. We didn't even know we were supposed to. We didn't even really know what emotions were, right? And so it just was the norm. But now we're realizing the impact of it. With every experience we have, it creates emotions. And you're right, it's very rare that we actually feel one emotion. We often feel 5, 10, 15, 20 different emotions at the same time. So if I've spent my whole life avoiding feeling emotions and now I have to start, that's overwhelming because there's just too much coming at me and I've been pushing it down for so long. That's a lot of emotion that have built up over the years. So, what we really do is we really start with basic emotions and we talk about what they feel like in our body. What happens is we have a thought that creates a chemical reaction that we then feel physiologically in our body. And that's what an emotion is. But most people don't really realize. They'll say, what does it feel like to feel, even something like anger, which is one we're more used to. A lot of people say, what do you mean? I don't know what it feels like. Well, what does your head do? What does your jaw do? What do your eyes do? What happens to your shoulder? Happens to your heart, to your breathing? What happens to your chest? Does it feel heavy and tight? What is your stomach doing? What do your muscles do? What are your hands doing? Are you feeling sweaty? Do you feel hot? Do you feel cold? We go through the whole body and talk about what it feels like to feel that emotion. And we go through and do that with a lot of emotions. Usually, depending on how, some people are a bit more aware of emotions than others, but we usually do at least 5 emotions up to 15 or 20. And just helping people become more aware of what these emotions feel like. And sadly, a lot of people say, jealousy or vulnerability. They'll say, well, I don't know. Right. Because as soon as you started to even feel it just a little bit, you shut it off. So we don't even really know what it feels like. So how do you create that emotion? We just talk about a time that you might have felt that. So if I talk about a time where you might have felt vulnerable, say when you were 7 years old and your mom forgot to pick you up at school, that even just thinking about that starts to create an emotion because thoughts create our emotions. So we become more aware of what we may be feeling. But then the other really important tool that we do is I get my clients to print off a list of emotions. There's a list on my website, on my blog section, but honestly, if you look anywhere, you Google emotions list, you're going to find a list. And what I suggest is print off a bunch of them. Put one on the fridge, one in the living room, one in the bathroom, one in the bedroom, one in your car, put one on your phone as a screensaver. And then when something comes up and you start feeling something, you're not sure what it is, pull out the list and start looking through the emotions that you are feeling. They'll jump off the page at you. You'll be very aware of what those emotions are. And so that can be a really helpful way of starting to figure out what those emotions are. If I just have to try to think on the spot, and I've spent decades suppressing those emotions, I'm not going to come up with very many. And I'll likely come up with the ones that are a bit more safe for me to feel. Using that list can really help you become more and more comfortable in feeling your emotions. The more you feel them, the more you're letting them out, then you don't have to carry as much. And it gets easier because it's more practiced and there's less there over time.
What's interesting with this for me is that, you mentioned anxiety and depression. We talked about addiction, and then you specifically mentioned anger as being one of the ways people may cope. And with anger being an emotion and a coping mechanism, that seems like it's, it seems a little bit difficult to use something that is an emotion as a coping mechanism, but apparently that can happen.
Yeah, I think anger, what we say about anger is an emotion, but it's actually a coping strategy that we use to suppress and shut down other emotions. Anger has been socially acceptable for hundreds of years. It's forever. It can even be seen as a sign of being tough and being strong and all those kind of things. It's not, but that's the excuse we use to justify continuing to allow ourselves to be angry. But if you start feeling angry, pull out the emotions list, you will find other emotions underneath there that you don't want to feel. And so if you get better at feeling those emotions, you don't need the anger anymore.
Mm.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say there's a cycle of anger that happens. So we've got, the explosion, which is where the anger happens. It could be anything. It could be just thoughts in my own head. Could be huffing and puffing and stomping around the house. Could be yelling. Could be swearing. Could be being verbally abusive. Could be throwing things, hitting, pushing. Could look like a variety of different things. But we have the explosion. Then we have the honeymoon stage. This is, there's just a sense of relief. Everyone in the family goes, oh, okay, it's over with. We got a bit of a break, right? This is the part where there's often some connection. I'm sorry. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to get mad. Let's go for dinner. Let's watch a movie. There's some connection. Sometimes it's just nothing, but there's a sense of connection. This is the part that keeps the cycle going. It gives the people in the cycle a sense of hope that maybe it won't happen again. But then life happens, which is the third stage, just daily living. With everything we do, it creates emotion. I can't find my keys to get to work. I forgot to get fuel in my vehicle, so I'm going to have to be late for work. My child forgot to bring their agenda home, so I know I'm going to get a message from the teacher after school because I didn't sign the agenda. All these little things create emotion. That doesn't include the years and years of emotion that I've been holding down and suppressing for years and years and years as well. So that emotion builds and builds and builds and builds. And we get to the last stage, which is the trigger. Something happens or some sort of a trigger so we can explode and let all that emotion out. Problem with the exploding is the emotion's kind of coming out in anger, but then it's coming back down. We haven't really dealt with any of the emotion. But now I have to carry more because I feel guilty. I feel regret, disconnected because I got mad at people that I'm supposed to love and care about in my family. So now I carry even more emotion. And that cycle continues over and over and over again. And the only way to break that cycle long term is we have to get better at feeling our emotions. If I can feel my emotions and sort through them, they aren't building. So I don't need a trigger. So I'm not getting angry.
And that makes total sense. I think where it's very difficult now to think about this is you've got core beliefs and you're bringing awareness that there is that you've built this core belief, right? So now there's awareness. But even with awareness, how do you go back and undo some of those things, or at least address those things in a way that don't lead to needing to use a coping mechanism in order to escape?
I think accountability is a big part, right? So we can't go back and change things. What happened, it's over with, it's done with. And the I'm sorries fall on deaf ears after they've said I'm sorry 3, 5, 10, 15, 100 times. It doesn't mean anything. So there needs to be accountability, but with moving forward responsibility on making sure those behaviors aren't happening anymore. And so if you've gotten mad and yelled at your partner before, you're working on things, you're understanding it, you're really working on yourself and getting better at feeling emotions. And you can go to your partner and say, I know I got really angry. Now I understand why I was doing it. It was all this other emotion. I'm working really hard on sorting this out. It was never my right to take that out on you, and I should have never done that. That can heal a lot of that relationship. But if I say those things and then get angry again the next day, it doesn't mean anything. It's nothing. So you can take that accountability, but there has to be that moving forward with things as well. We're very good at making excuses. Even when we look at that cycle of anger, we talk about the trigger. It's not really a trigger. It's an excuse I use to get angry, right? I've had families, and lots of families, focus on the trigger. So we've got an angry parent coming home from work. One kid runs and puts the laundry away because that was a trigger a few days ago. The other one is sitting at the table doing their homework because missed homework was a trigger last week. The other one runs and makes sure the counters are all clean and tidy because that was a trigger a few days ago. Angry parent comes in and there's a shoe in the front entrance and boom, the explosion happens. It's not the trigger that creates the anger. It's this buildup of emotion. If I've got a lot of emotion, I will find a trigger. I will find an excuse that I can use to explode. And we know that because a lot of times these triggers have happened many, many times before. Don't cause an explosion before. Now all of a sudden they do. Not about the trigger. If the emotion is too high, we will find a reason to explode. Just talking about that cycle of anger, how we've got the explosion, the honeymoon, the daily living, and the trigger. That is the cycle of anger, but it is the cycle of any unhealthy coping strategy we use to suppress emotions. So whatever it is for you, whether it's shopping, whether it's alcohol, whether it's marijuana, whether it's lying, whether it's cheating, whether it's stealing, whether it's avoidance, whatever it is, it will fit in that cycle. There'll be eating disorder, self-harming behavior. There'll be days where you go, you don't even think about that behavior, but then that emotion starts to build and build and build and build and build. And then there will be something where that emotion just becomes too high and you will go to that unhealthy coping strategy. So it is the cycle of anger, but it's the cycle of anything that we use to suppress emotions.
That's really important because it applies universally, and and that goes back to us thinking about the gambling that we talked about earlier, the drinking, because if you really start to think about it, all of those cycles are very, very, very similar, right? And and after the behavior, there's that period of the honeymoon period, the guilt and trying to get and trying to say that this is not where I want to be. I'm going to be better. Everybody has hope, and then it repeats.
Starts all over again. You bet. Yeah.
And so Sabrina, if people are out there and they're thinking, man, this may apply to me, what are the first steps that they need to take in order to get themselves in a better position? You've written the book, and so there is a resource there. But considering not everybody's going to have access to you, maybe they'll be able to, and hopefully they'll be able to read the book. But what should they do in order to start the path forward for themselves?
I think one of the beginning stages that's really, really important is the awareness. We have to just slow down a little bit and become aware how often that core belief, not good enough, not important, not valued, is presenting itself and what it looks like. So maybe it's being negative and complaining about everything. Maybe it's, never saying no and just taking on way too many things. Maybe it's, being drawn to people who don't treat me very well. Maybe it's never finding anything positive at work. You name it. It's going to be probably a combination of really, honestly, 50, 100, 1,000 different things. The more you become aware, once you become aware, there's that core belief again, then you can start to say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to change that core belief. So how can I find a positive out of this? How can I take this and feel more empowered? What can I do about this scenario rather than kind of playing the victim and, getting angry because no one's doing these things for you? Bottom line, it's up to you. You're the only one who can change your core belief. Good thing about that is you don't have to wait for anyone to do it for you. Bad thing about that is you're the only one who can do it. No one can do it for you. So
there is good and bad about it being up to you, right?
That's right.
So, well, if people wanted to find out more information or if they wanted to find you, where would they do that?
So I have a website. It's called trobakholistic.org. On the website, it's got all my social media, but I do a lot of social media as well. I'm on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. So I have a variety of different social media where I give little pieces of information about this. I also have a blog section on my website, which is just short 2 to 4 minute reads that give you a little bit of information about various mental health topics. And then on my website is also a page that has the podcast interviews that I've done as well, where I'm talking about, mental health in various areas with different podcasters.
And for your book, where is it available?
So the book is available on Amazon. It's also available. There's a page on my website where you can access it there. But Amazon is definitely going to be the cheapest place to access the book as well. The book is a handbook, so it really helps you sort through and figure out your own core belief. So you read some examples of, how that core belief has developed in general. And then there's an activity where you're reading and figuring out, okay, so how do I apply this to my own life? So you're reading little bits at a time and then applying that information to your own personal experiences.
I love it. So I am going to link all of those things in the description of the episode so that people are able to listen, watch, and read based on some of the conversation that we've had here. I think this is remarkable, and the work that you do is extremely important. So thank you for doing it, but also thank you for sharing it with us, because I think there's a lot of need to understand where some of these things come from and how we can address them, and ways for us to get better by recognizing things in ourselves. And so thank you so much for spending time with us. And I look forward to reading more, learning more, and perhaps we'll get to talk again.
That would be great. Thanks for having me. It was nice chatting with you.
Same. If you've made it this far, then I have to thank you for your time. I hope you've learned something new and enjoyed listening to the discussion as much as I enjoyed having it. I'd love to hear from you about the show, because we're working really hard to bring you great content, and the feedback really helps us get better. If you like what you've heard or watched, for those of you who are streaming out on YouTube, then take a split second to give us a thumbs up or a like. It really helps other people like you find the show too. And no one likes to miss out on the good stuff, so go ahead and subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't have to wonder when or if there's a new episode. And until next time, stay remarkable.